So welcome to The Design Life. This is our first podcast and one of many. We're hoping to do perhaps one every fortnight, I think that's the plan, isn't it? And within this trio that we've got here, we've got James, who runs James Innes Design, top-end gardens and design of gardens for really lovely houses. And our belief is that these gardens will really enhance the value of a house and the aesthetics and the enjoyment of a house. And beside me I've got Beck, who runs Saskia Kate, interior design, and she looks after the top-end interior designs of some of the houses which I love to sell, along with James's. I'll let them both explain themselves. I, on the other hand, I'm Jason Corbett from Royal Buying Agents, and I focus on buying houses for people who have not a lot of time on their hands and who want to get properties which are off-market and properties which are rarely available but quite special. So I'm going to hand over to James now to make his own introduction about what you do in your favourite gardens and what you bring to the table.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Jason. Well, I love gardens in general, but gardens are such an exciting space to think about both what's unique to the individual, but also how you can really create something which will stand the test of time. And I think the gardens that I really love are the ones where designers have been bold and sort of pushed the boundaries of what you typically expect to find in the garden. And it's really great to work with clients who both want to create a space outside which suits their lifestyle, but where they're thinking about creating something which is going to last for people in the future to enjoy too. So that's what really excites me. And it's just really lovely working with both clients and other professionals who take design seriously and take the creative profession seriously.
I expect you probably have some garden designs which you really don't like doing, or you're given instructions by clients which you go, oh, please, and you try and adjust those, or how does that work?
I think as a garden designer, we're always learning as designers because there's so much we need to master and things are always changing. And a lot of what we're trying to do with clients is education. So obviously there's always going to be a compromise at some point. But part of the value I add is educating clients about what's going to work best for them as opposed to what they necessarily think they want to start with.
And who normally wins this battle?
Oh, they do.
they win. Yeah. And how about you, Beck? You must have the same sort of problems.
Exactly. Just transfer all of that into the interiors. So Saskia Kate Interiors is a residential interior design practice. So we work all the way through from the very first stages through to completion. So typically we work very closely with architects and the wider team on projects, pre-planning often or ideally, all the way through to concept, detailed design, FF&E and handover. And I think, like James, it's really important to work with the clients. That's what we love to do. We're really collaborative as a studio, and it's very much led by their vision and what they need from their home. And that collaboration extends to working with the other professionals that either the client brings in or we bring into the project. So garden designers, contractors, architects, all of the specialists that form the wider team. And I think that's how you get a really great project.
Yeah, and there are lots of interior designers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What makes you who you are?
I think I've talked about this recently. I think it comes down to the people in the business actually, because ultimately we all deliver the same service, but it's the people that you're working with and the level of attention and care. We design with heart. We care a lot about what we do and delivering for our clients. So you get a very hands-on, personal approach working with us.
And something I've noticed already, because we're working on a project together, but you have real loyalty to your clients, and that's something
Absolutely.
I've noticed. And I think, especially in some areas of design, people can be maybe pushing a certain style, or maybe it's very much shifted towards just being a business. But actually, I think all of us value those sort of personal connections with the people we're working with, and treating them as people who we value and respect.
I think you're absolutely right, and actually it's something that I'm really passionate about. We don't push, as you don't, we don't push our designs on clients. We're not designing for our portfolio, we're designing somebody's home. It's the most personal thing that you're going to probably work on with somebody. So, you've got to listen to your clients.
I think that's why we've come together, isn't it, really? Because, in fact, you formed this networking group, which has caused us to find each other. And that's all about a group of individuals who all have the client at top of mind.
Yeah.
And we're all dealing with a similar sort of level of client. I think it's really, really important from my point of view, and I know it is from both of yours, that the client's will is paramount, but we're also all experienced enough that we're there and recognise that we just don't jump, we guide as well. And guidance in using our best experience and all those years of knowledge is actually what they're really paying for, although sometimes they don't know that. you need to help them understand that.
That's the trick.
You agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've got a list here of things that we're going to talk about today, and this podcast really is just our introduction podcast. So I thought we'd start with about our sort of best and worst experiences, perhaps. Who wants to jump first?
Oh gosh, best and worst.
Well volunteered.
Well, I might as well jump in there. I think we're really lucky, actually, that we have lovely clients. I think we attract a certain type of client, which means typically they tend to be people we love working with. So the worst projects, very, very few and far between, are probably those where it just hasn't been the right fit. Clients that don't necessarily understand or buy into the process, which can be quite tricky. The best projects, I love working with clients who want to be part of the whole project. They want to be really involved. And I think that's really important. And that's not to say, as you said before, Jason, that we guide them and we're here to educate and make recommendations on how they should approach certain things and where to invest their budgets. But they listen to that advice, but they also want to input. So those are the best projects we love working on.
Is that similar for you, James?
I think in terms of the worst experiences, as a designer, from day one, even before you formally start a project, you're investing your emotional energy and your creative energy thinking through, a vision, developing an idea for it and taking it forwards. I think the times which has been most difficult is where you've invested a huge amount of your energy and creativity, and where ultimately, either an early stage or a later stage, the client then is unable to carry things forward, and that's always difficult. But as a garden designer, the bit that's always most magical and is always, no matter what the project and how big it is, or sort of the context, is when the planting starts going in the ground, because that's ultimately when you get that special connection between what makes a garden usually special is that it's a space for people. It's often connecting to the house through hard landscaping, but then it has this certain magic, which is quite unique in terms of gardens as a medium to design in, where you put a living thing into the ground. You know that sometimes it will work, but sometimes it won't. And exactly how it grows over time is always really sort of interesting.
And I think that's probably for both of you, it's a little bit more of a challenge than it is for me, because once we've done the interiors, we hand over a finished article, and then it's lived in and it evolves over time.
Mellows with children.
Gardens, well, mellows is a very, I'm going to use that. The gardens, you put them in and they need to mature. They're going to get better. And
But
with
I think
properties, same.
I think with you though, right, is that no taste stays the same for a period of time. Right?
True.
So you've got to think, as you both do, as we all do, actually, you have to think about what are they going to want in 5 years' time. Because what you design today, if it's ultra modern and contemporary, in 5 years' time, that is no longer contemporary and modern. That is now old.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be able to recognise that it either needs decorating over the top of, or it can be added to or extended. And the same with you. You plant it today and it's this tall, and then in 6 years' time, you've got a jungle if it hasn't been maintained properly. So you've then got to consider, I would have thought, the context of how, if they're going to have a gardener or if they're going to do it themselves, what colours they like. Is it going to be changeable in seasons?
Yeah. I think this probably relates to your business, Jason, in terms of helping people understand properties and what they're actually buying into, because especially if you're moving from an urban context to a larger country garden, really understanding both the expertise, the time, the cost of maintaining a garden so that it's successful and works for their lifestyle can be quite a challenge. And obviously that's where a garden designer can come in to provide that longer term care too. And all the great designers their designs stand the test of time because their gardens are looked after, and many of them provide long-term care, and that's something I do as well, where you make sure that the vision is being realised, but ultimately it's always adapting because the garden's always changing, and of course with changing climate as well, that's a particular sort of challenge in terms of that's facing the industry as a whole.
Yeah, so I'm interested in our crossover, right? So from my point of view, if I have the first impression of a house is as you walk up the path to the house in the front door, people can fall in love with the house within 15 seconds. Yeah. And that, you know, you know
it's
this.
Quite an emotional response.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
You imagine it like this, and I say this quite a lot to clients. Even if you've not seen the garden, you walk in, you go for a dinner party at night time. You walk in the house, and you have supper, and you perhaps use the loo, and then that's the only 2 rooms you've seen, and the hallway, and you leave, and as you're driving away, you say to your partner, "That was a bloody nice house, wasn't it?" But you've only seen 1 room, and you've already fallen for that house. So you don't need to see a whole house to fall for it. But there's something within the interior, which comes into your area, which just creates that wow. Now, perhaps it's the fun that you've had in the evening. I don't think people are that naive. I think that builds into it. But I think, in actual fact, there's something about that room that they saw and spent time in that they love the house. And similarly, during the day, you can drive past a house and it's got beautiful greenery on the walls or in the garden, and it's got this avenue which forces your view to where you want it to be. And again, you can drive past the house and go, "Wow, that is an amazing house, and I'd really like to know more about that house." You know,
have you had clients that have bought properties for the garden rather than the house? Somebody that's walked in and thought, "I just love the."
I hesitate to say this.
Space.
Talking to an interior designer.
I'm sure it happens.
Have I had people that? I think I've had clients who. My way of operation is to show the externals and then take videos of the whole internal and the external. And I have had clients who have just looked at the external and gone, "I love that house." The internal they can change. Yeah. But the garden and the house. So I saw a house in Cobham through Savills, a chap called Tim Harrison in Savills, who my client's been looking for a while. And there was this, what would have been just an ordinary house on a private estate. But they had put extensions on the side and they put burnt wood cladding on it. And the house looked spectacular. And my clients were prepared to pay way over the real value because of the aesthetical appearance of it. And when you went inside, of course, it looked great as well. But the cladding and the garden, not so much the lawn area, because that was just a lawn, but the way the house looked, the aesthetics of that, which a lot of that comes down to what you do, sold the house to them. Yeah. Absolutely. The house in itself is probably a bit small.
But as I said, it's such an emotional response. It's probably the purchase more than any other it's not a rational purchase. I mean, I'm sure there are some practical considerations, but you know when you walk into a house, you either feel it or you don't.
Yeah. I think there's sort of 2 things. That I think the garden's one thing, and it helps if the garden is already beautiful and if it's already tying that house to its landscape. But I always think it's the setting of the house and its plot which is really important.
I think that's right.
Because it's then how you feel in relation to what's around the house. And different people like different things. Some people like to feel more enclosed, some people like to have an open view, but that's really important. And of course, then the garden can play an important role of either mitigating or enhancing that sort of experience. And then for me, that's like the first reaction is, does my gut feel happy here at this house outside? And then of course, you go into the interior itself, and it is amazing how different houses can feel and how they're decorated. But I think that it is those 2 sort of decision points of, do I like how this house feels in its setting and the atmosphere that creates? And then it's when you then go inside, does it feel like a happy home? Yeah. And the interiors absolutely dictate, as well as the layout, whether it feels happy. And I know that's a completely subjective sort of statement.
But I think that part of our role, all of us actually, is to guide and educate the clients again on, it might not be the perfect house for you as it is now, but what can you do with that?
Yeah, visualising
what can you do with the internal?
That's where our experience comes in to actually make it something. So actually, I had a question from you 2 just chatting there. I had a thought, because there is a crossover, isn't there? So take a house, a good sized house. There is a crossover where you might have a house with a courtyard in the middle, or a lot of in an orangery. Now, do you get involved in that, or is that just down to you?
Well, again, going back to the way that we work is very collaborative. So if there's any space within the house, or actually even indoor planting, we would always work closely with the landscape designer to talk about, well, what plants are going to work with the level of natural light here, and maintenance, how easy are they to keep. So, yeah, I think you've got to work as part of a team and pull in those expertise.
I think as a sort of compulsive obsessive, I'd be very keen to be involved with everything, because
We're control freaks.
Is that your character?
That is my character. But I think also all designers need to know our limits, and that's why bringing in experts, whether they're architects or specialist pool designers, then that's where we can then be comforted that we don't have to lift everything. But I think as a designer, we see good design and bad design in different spheres, and absolutely how you manage the house and its connection to the garden can be either done really well or sort of got really wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think it's always the best possible circumstances always to have a really good team where you've got architect, interior designer, garden designer, and any other experts required who are going to fill in gaps, all on the same page early, because then you can make sure everything talks to each other well. And I think, from a garden design perspective, I always start with the house, because we're looking at how that projects out into the space around it, and therefore what the garden should look like. But if mistakes have been made in terms of the design of the house and its architecture, or how it then might talk to its landscape, then it's a matter of mitigating rather than actually enhancing.
And actually, sorry, this is something I get on my soapbox about all the time, but the earlier that you can involve everybody in a project, the better. So bring in your landscape designer really early on, bring in your interior designer really early on, any of those experts that are going to be working on the project, because, as you said, then you've got the opportunity to work together and create a cohesive scheme inside and out, ensure that the flow, the layout, the moving from those indoor to outdoor spaces, it works as well as it could do, because once you've started construction and you get to a certain point, there's very little you can do. And again, lighting. So lighting, thinking about exterior lighting as well as the lighting inside, that needs to be thought through really early on. And people quite often don't realise how early you need to think about these things.
We should probably do a podcast on that.
I think there's a whole podcast
I think there is. Well, speaking of which, we're actually in Roundhouse Design Kitchen Showroom right now, so thank you very much. And in the next episode, we're going to have Matt from Roundhouse joining us. The plan of our podcast is to have the three of us here each podcast, and then with one guest. And next week, I think it's in a fortnight's time, we'll have Matt from Roundhouse. What we haven't discussed, and we've sort of done it in a bit of a round, but what we haven't really covered is why someone would use each of us. And I think there's a moment here, because I think we've probably been going about 15 minutes now, and I think there's a moment here for each of us just to say what benefit we bring to the client beyond what we've already discussed. And I think there's an opportunity for you to sell yourself to our huge audience out there. So why don't you start, James?
I think ultimately a garden has the capacity to add real value to our lives, putting aside any financial gain from the rising value of the property itself. I think it's just a garden should be about you as an individual, as a family, or with your friends, really enjoying a space, and a space where we can connect with nature and hopefully sort of be more relaxed. That's certainly why I moved into garden design, or at least why I moved into gardening. It was what I really enjoyed as a way of sort of deconnecting from what is increasingly a sort of frenetic and stressful world. I suppose what I offer is the chance for people to create something which is hopefully beautiful, a work of art outside for them to enjoy with their family, but which needs to then balance all the practical considerations. And the reality is that gardens are complicated things because they're always changing. There's many different factors to take into account. And a garden designer can really take a step back, look at the client objectively and what do they actually want and need, rather than what they have just at the top of their brain at that time. What's going to be correct and appropriate for the site that they actually have, because you see a lot of design where people are cookie cutting ideas from Instagram and then pasting them onto a site where it's completely inappropriate for the context of the house and garden. And so what I offer is something which is bespoke to the client, which is going to be manageable and livable with their day-to-day lives, but which is going to be something which they really enjoy. And in those little things where, just like having a coffee outside when the sun is rising is not something we ever put at the top of our, like, what do we want from a happy life? But for me personally, that's one of the happiest moments in my day, is just that moment of calm, a little bit of caffeine, birds singing. I think that's, crafting something beautiful to enjoy that is really special. And for me personally as well, I think it's really important the client both feels very at ease during the process, but it should be an enjoyable process for them. It should be both sort of a cathartic and creative process for the client. And so coming back what you were saying, Beck, about it being a collaborative process, certainly for me personally, I will design a garden for a client, but the best designs are when they're involved and are being drawn into that creative process.
And I'd have thought, as with all of us, the value, because we need to talk about cost. I'm not going to ask you to comment on your cost because it's going to vary from garden to garden, but the value comes from time and your learnings. And I preach this quite a lot, that even if it takes you only a week to design and produce a really lovely garden, or design, you won't produce it in a week, but design a garden that's really great, you're able to do it that quickly because you've had all the years of experience doing it, and however many decades of experience in creating these things. So what people are actually paying for is your decades of experience to give them their decades of future.
I'm not sure if I quite got decades yet, but we're working on it. But I think gardens also have the capacity to cause a lot of stress because people feel they've got this potential and they don't know what to do with it, and the lawn's growing and there's trees that have gotten too big, and they're aware that it's not really as good as it could be, but it's not quite important enough to them to ever quite grasp. And so it's always just kind of sitting there as this kind of like unfulfilled potential. And I think there's that kind of anxiety in people's minds, which actually it shouldn't be like that. And my job is to help turn it on its head and be like, actually, let's see all the positive things that are already there.
And future-proof it.
And future-proof, exactly.
Yeah.
So, again, this is something I've got a few subjects I could get on my soapbox about. I think people underestimate the amount of work when they take on a big project. So whether it's a new build or a large-scale renovation, the number of decisions that they're going to have to make are huge. So right from, pre they get planning, there are a myriad of things that they need to make a decision on. All of the interior architecture, the design, the tiny details, a lot of the technical elements, and that can be extremely overwhelming. Also, they never anticipate, so they end up having to rush decisions, and that is when you make mistakes. But bringing all of that together in a way that is cohesive, that works through the whole house, so that every decision you make works with every other choice. So it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. So we really help to make sure that the design might look effortless at the end, but then all the paddling underneath and the number of decisions, it takes the stress out. It's going. I think that's something we probably all share in common. Actually,
You probably save money by people who buy the wrong furniture and then have to buy another piece because they got it wrong.
And something I've talked about over the last few years as well is considered choices, not mistakes, because it can be really, really costly. If you make a mistake and it's not something you're prepared to live with, or it's something that has to be rectified, I mean, that can be huge. It's probably the biggest investment you're going to make in your life is your house and your garden.
And it's just the same for gardens, and I know you'll be thinking about this in terms of your clients when they're coming to view a property, like what's this property going to cost me, not just up front, but then to get it to where I want it to be. And if there's that myriad of choices you have to make, and then inevitably you rush things and make the wrong choices, and actually that's where things can get really costly, because either if you get the wrong choices for hard landscaping outside and something fails, then that's a major issue going forward. And also for things like planting, if you choose the wrong plants, they will die, and you'll be wasting thousands of pounds.
And effort and stress, and that's probably quite emotional as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would think it's similar for you in terms of what the value that you bring to your clients. Like all of us, our clients are really busy people, and that's a given. But the level of stress, because it is such an emotionally driven purchase, the stress of finding the right property, I'm sure that's the same for you.
I think that's right. I mean, so my typical client, I should imagine the same as you, is actually somebody, it's not necessarily a minimum price point, although I do have one. But that's not really the focus. The focus is actually on people who actually really value a service. They value. I have been in this industry for 37 years. I'm not 50, I'm not 90.
You're showing your age.
I'm not 90. As you can tell, I started this at school, and I've worked for. Pardon me. I headed up Sotheby's International Realty in Carter Jonas in London. I was part of their London offices and Savills, and I've worked for a lot of the big firms. And I've been doing buying agency for a little while now. And what I learnt in all that time is what a client asks for and what they end up buying are often two very different things. And part of my journey with a client is to really help them, to get inside their head, actually to really establish what it is that they want. And when you can understand what they want, actually finding the actual property, of which 9 times out of 10 it's going to be off market. It's not going to be a property that's available on Rightmove or any of the internet. It's through my connections with the estate agents. And then I find them the right house. And that can take a week. It can take 6 months, but I will find them the right house. Don't doubt that for a minute. But then I have to sell, or not sell, but sell's wrong, because I don't sell anything. I open doors for buyers to choose which door they want to walk through. But I have to help them and visualize that this is going to be what they want. Because very often the bones which you buy are just that, the bones, but the fabric. But the actual design inside or the garden,
it's the potential.
It needs. Sometimes we find the perfect property, and that's great. But it's a bit like, if you were to buy a brand new house, bespokely made for you, in 6 months' time, there's something you're going to want to change in the house. It's not quite right. Whereas if you have a house that you find that you actually love the location and you love the setting, and then you have it designed inside from that point, then that house is going to work for you. And you can change that house, but the setting and the location will always be
Back
right.
to your point.
Okay? It will always be right. Location, location, location. It's an adage, but it's absolutely true. When you get the location, the setting right, the interior can be changed to suit you at any time. And you can add on, you can take away, you can extend, you can do anything you like. But what you can't do is move the house. Unless you buy a kit house, and then you can. That's what I do. It's not about, as I said, it's not about a level of value. Of value of the house. It's about a level of experience that the client wants to utilise in the service. Because frankly, to use my service and to use both of your services, they can just do that from WhatsApp in their office or in their home. And we just ask a few questions and we get them to exactly where they want to be in the shortest available time. And they're buying the best house, garden, interior within the shortest period of time. So what is the value? The value is time, or is it monetary? I'd suggest it's both. So looking at the last pieces here, because we're probably running out of time here, we've covered does price matter. So what's next week? Well, we've sort of said that. We've got Matt from Roundhouse in the kitchen design. It won't be next week, it'll be the week after that. He's going to talk about the value of a new kitchen and kitchen design. Beck's going to lead that one for us because this is very much your area.
Something I love.
yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I think we'll say goodbye till the next one.
Thank you.